first, let me introduce the session by itself. So it's called Abandonment of Rural and Urban Landscapes, because we also sometimes have abandonment in the cities and settlements, emptiness, and understanding the gradient drivers and implications. And this is a part of the activity of the working group on the global land abandonment. And from the organizers and also co-coordinators of this working group, let me introduce, well, shortly myself, Alexander Prishchepov from the University of Copenhagen, and also Justus Liebig Universitet in Gießen, and Hein, also here. So another land abandonment guy. So, and with this, let me give some kind of the intro words about things. First of all, to promote our specialized working group through Global Land Program, we are functioning, we have webinars. Even once we had a PhD school, international PhD school at the University of Copenhagen, bringing the students together, running international faculty. We have sessions, so it's also part of the activity, sometimes working jointly on the publications, placing the synthesis, so converging the knowledge about this interesting process, what we will also hear today. It's like a preamble, we always hear about this story on agricultural expansion and population growth, that it goes hand in hand with agricultural expansion and more food has to be produced. This kind of the scary picture, sure. But at the same time, if to see at the statistics, we also notice and witness the stagnation of agricultural expansion, and in some parts we start noticing land abandonment. And some of you may be asking the questions, okay, how can we define abandonment? We will probably keep a separate discussion. It's never-ending discussion. How can we identify abandonment? But also what it shows that somewhere between 80 to 120 million hectares of lands are not cultivated for various reasons. And also what it shows that it's not anymore the process, what's so-called disease of developed countries. It's pretty widespread process, so more and more new hotspots appear, and we hear today about one hotspot in Nepal. The abandonment is not a uniform process, it's very diverse, and we witness in many parts of the world, and that also shows complexity to study this process. Maybe deforestation is super hard to study, but it's also very hard to study the process of farmland abandonment. And for today, we have just very few presentations, so there will be some travel through globe. So we will start with the ongoing forest expansion, so due to the land abandonment in Nepal, and Karuna Budhatoke, she will present this work, coming to inspire us and learning about this process. Then we'll jump and travel to Europe and to look with Anton Van Rope on a process of farmland abandonment in Europe. And then I will talk about maybe a little bit provocative topic on unique parts of the landscapes abandonment may represent, some sort of the abandonescapes, if we should treat this differently for the policies as well. And my question to the audience, if Charlie, he reached us or he didn't reach us? Probably he is not here. If he will come, then we'll try to accommodate, but then it will give us extra time for discussion and reflection on that. With this, thank you, and let's proceed with the presentations. So I will be making also notes, and I will take care of the time. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I am a PhD student in the University of Helsinki, and today I will be presenting my research on forest expansion in Nepal. So this work that I'm presenting today is a section of a paper which was recently published in Environmental Research Letters, Land Covers Associated with Forest Expansion Hotspots in the Nepal Himalaya. And if you see the map, it shows the study area, Nepal, which is located in the central Himalaya, and there are 5 physiographic regions from spanning from south, like lowland Tarai, which range from tropical to subtropical climate, and then towards alpine region in the north in the higher Himalayas. So this altitudinal and climatic variability affects the vegetation, agriculture, and overall land use dynamics in the country. I will talk about the overall concept of the research and then focus more on the method, result, and discussion of one of the objectives. Forest expansion in Nepal. The study tries to look at the spatiotemporal and land cover change dynamics of forest regeneration in the last 2 decades. Multiple case studies, national scale studies have asserted that forests are indeed regenerating in Nepal. If we look more into the drivers of forest gain, so community forest management, which was initiated in the 1980s, has really been gained momentum and institutionalized. It has been integrated into the policy and governance of the country, so it is considered still as one of the major drivers of forest recovery and regeneration, especially in degraded forest areas. But more recently, in the past 2 decades, outmigration in Nepal has kind of become a very prominent phenomenon. So since 2001 to 2011, which is in a 1 decade span, the population, international migrants, the numbers increased from 750,000 to 1.9 million, so 150% increase of outmigration from rural mountainous areas. And many research since then have tried to link outmigration, land abandonment, and then linking that with forest regeneration. However, many of the studies have been kind of dominantly case study based and in specific areas in the middle mountain areas. So in this study, we asked 3 major questions, which was when and where did forest expand? Where are the most significant regions of forest expansion? And I will not talk about this today, but it's in the paper. Spoilers, it's the middle mountain or the mountainous areas. Today we will talk about what land covers have been transitioning into forest in Nepal in the past 2 decades. So for the method, we used a visual interpretation of very high resolution images which are available on Google Earth, and we use the Open Forest Collect Earth platform. These sampling points are extracted from the forest gain data, which is from the National Land Cover Monitoring System of Nepal. So we use those forest gain points and then use them as samples for the Collect Earth survey. So each sampling point was divided into these 9 grid cells, which represent 30 by 30 meter. And based on the availability of the earliest image and the latest image, we estimated how many units of land converted into forest in that time frame. So here you can see we estimate this as about 6 units of shrubland have been converted into 6 units of shrubland, and 2 units of cropland have been converted into forest. Another example might be the agroforestry landscape in the middle mountains. So we treat them as cropland still when we see the rows of trees. And here we estimate that 7 units of cropland have been converted into forest from 2003 to 2019. And this visual interpretation, it was based on image interpretation principles proposed by Payne and Kaiser, which mainly focus on the shape, size, pattern, the texture, color, and the relative shadows in the landscape that we are assessing. And whenever possible, we used the wet season and dry season imagery because the area is also very distinct in terms of monsoon and dry season. We find in total we assessed 988 samples this way, and forest gain was visible in 540 of the samples. And due to the limitation in the availability of imagery, the earliest image year ranged from 2000 to 2014, but the overall share of shrubland to forest and cropland to forest contribution remained somewhat similar, as you can see in the table, depending on the different image years. Coming to the physiographic regions, the most amount of agricultural or cropland to forest transition occurred in the Middle Mountain region, and cropland accounted for 40% of forest gains that we assessed in this region, followed by 25% in the High Mountain, and then it decreases in the Sivalik, which is the lesser lowland Himalayas, or like small hills, and then minimum in the Tarai, which is the alluvial plain, fertile alluvial plains. Further, because agricultural abandonment is becoming such an emerging issue, and our initial sample size was kind of small when we tried to quantify the land covers contributing to forest gain. So we took up additional buffer around each of the sample, which was a 1 kilometer square buffer. And in that landscape, larger landscape, we observed whether croplands were being converted into any other land type. So it could be bare land, shrubland, grassland, or forest. And this was noted as being true. So it was a presence-absence type of assessment. And here you can see that between 2002 and 2009, this landscape has had multiple patches of croplands which have been converted into either shrubland or to forest. So overall in Nepal, out of the total 988.65% of those samples had observable cropland abandonment in those larger landscapes. And it was most prominent in the Middle Mountain region. So here you can see the observed cropland abandonment by the physiographic regions, and it's mostly concentrated in the Middle Mountain regions. So coming to the discussion, this study kind of shows the multiple successional, more like aligns with the multiple successional pathways of forest regeneration, which is naturally very difficult to quantify or assess with land cover data. So here we see that croplands, especially when they are in existing agroforestry systems, could convert into forest in as fast as 6 to 10 years, while the dominance of shrubland tells us that it is either a intermediate state in a potentially multi-decadal succession process, or it could be kind of a semi-permanent stable state with like arrested succession, like degraded forest. So because the availability of very high resolution images are still limited, we cannot find out the source of those shrublands beyond the earliest image available. Nonetheless, we do think that this study was important in kind of setting this narrative of the variation in forest regeneration on abandoned croplands, because existing land cover data sets, the longitudinal land cover data sets, they seem to overestimate the contribution of cropland to forests in the same 2 decades. So these studies have the same time frame as the ones we used. This is further kind of corroborated kind of by the visual inspection of the cropland abandonment. So we see many fractional areas which have converted to forest quite rapidly, while others may not. So this shows kind of the biophysical and anthropogenic factors which are in play at the ground level, and I think this study with the incorporation of VHR imagery can serve as kind of a foundation or a baseline for more spatially explicit studies in this region. And also we at University of Helsinki, the research group, we are investigating further into these forest farm relationships, which are, like driven by these agrarian forest and forest transitions in the Himalaya, and which is impacted by outmigration and the return migration, whether the farmlands need to be utilized, reutilized, and so on. Thank you.
Presentation, and we have quite a bit of time for discussion, so reflections. Please go ahead. Yeah? I can go by name, Deepak, yeah. From University of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thanks. This is Deepak from University of Minnesota. So it's a great study, and I have not read your paper. Have you looked at like the succession, like when you abandon the cropland and it is converting into forests? Is there any relationship between like where this land was and why it became, say, forest land? Because in South Asia and many places it actually becomes an urban area. So is there a relationship between existing villages, or the land was really bad, or it was very far away from rivers or from roads? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So in this study, we do not do any type of spatially explicit investigation into the drivers, and only into what is happening or what has happened in the past 2 decades. But to answer your question, in context of Nepal, the urban areas are quite limited, and even in the middle mountains, I would say there are 2 major valleys, which is Kathmandu and Pokhara, that have like rapid urbanization and are more cores. The rest of the middle mountains are pretty rural, and you are correct that more marginal lands which are away from rivers, which do not have irrigation facilities, are the ones that get abandoned first. Yes.
Thank you. Charlotte. So, I don't know how best to say. Charlotte, okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm working in food security, and we are having problems in Mexico also with land abandonment and migration from rural areas. And now it's becoming a question if that compromises food security regionally, like at different scales. Do you feel that this compromises food security for your area?
The short answer is yes, so even within Nepal, between different regions, there are some historical trends of land use and different societies and how they rely on their livelihood. So for communities whose livelihood has been changed into, let's say, recruitment with the army, or because we have a lot of like British, Singaporean, Indian army recruitments going on, so they are already like above the subsistence farming, and some more, I think more recently in the western part of Nepal, which has been quite remote and inaccessible compared to the central regions. The first part of my study also showed that there is quite less forest expansion in the western region because people are still very reliant on land, on subsistence agriculture. So I recently went there for a field visit and found that they are converting their practices to more commercial type of practices. And I think it's also to do with how cheap rice imports that we're getting from India, because agriculture is more heavily subsidized there, and compared to Nepal where it's more difficult. So yes, but it's complex. Yes.
Okay, this Deepak ask question. I have to ask one because we are partners in crime. So So Liang Yu from IPRI, maybe I don't understand your methodology. When you actually identify what is abandoned land, convert it first, you just by visualization, just look at Google image to 400, and then I guess this is sampling, right? How did you from sampling to the whole, whatever is the land the percentage you put it on? I didn't get.
Okay. So the first part of the study involves the use of the surveyor HKH data, land cover data, and when I asked the question, where are the most significant regions of expansion? So we use that data to identify these forest gain areas based on the longitudinal land cover data, because we have annual land cover data for Nepal. But when we try to see the land cover change matrix, it says that 65% of the forest gains are coming in from cropland, which we wanted to investigate further because as I said, outmigration and land abandonment is a fairly recent process in Nepal. So we complement the land spatiotemporal analysis with this visual inspection. And initially I mentioned in the methods that we estimated the units or cells. So each of the sample contains nine cells. So we just put the number of cells that converted from any land cover into forest, and then use that number to gain the percentage of how much each land cover is contributing to forest gain.
Thank you. One more question.
Thank you very much for your talk. This might not be within the scope of your study, but I was wondering if you had any sense whether the trees that were being introduced to the landscape, whether that was natural regrowth or whether they were being planted intentionally?
Yes, it is not within the scope of this study, but I know that it is both in case of Nepal. There's a lot of natural regeneration, but that requires the biophysical environment to be highly suitable. So usually around the valleys where there's like lots of water and the aspect of the hill. But then there are also a lot of afforestation activities going on with the community forestry program that I mentioned before. So that happens outside of agriculture land. And then more recently, because people are moving out, they have started to plant timber species in their private agricultural areas so that they can, so it's everything, I guess.
So my question, just to follow up, so it means that it's also, sometimes we discuss about abandonment, it's a transition process. So it's, in fact, sometimes it's pure abandonment and sometimes it's kind of the reuse. So abandoning agriculture in favor of other land uses.
Yes, I think while doing this research, one of the main questions that I delved into, or our research group is trying to establish, is what is abandonment? How do we define abandonment? It's because there are land underutilization, there is reutilization after a certain fallow period. So it's a pretty loose term, and I think we will be able to establish it more better in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for your presentation and having this fruitful discussion. Yes, now I pass the ball to Anton. He will be presenting. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. It's nice to see you. I would like to thank the organizers of the sessions, first of all, to accept our paper, and most of all to organize this kind of topic, because I think it's a super important and relevant topic. So I'm Anton van Rompuy. I'm from the Geography Research Group KU Leuven. That's more or less 100 researchers, and within that larger group there is a group looking at let's say landscape dynamics, rural-urban interfaces, and we also look at land abandonment worldwide. But the presentation I have here today is on abandonment in Europe, together with Lisa Marie, who is also in the room, by the way. So I propose that if after this presentation, if you have easy questions, you ask them to me. More difficult questions, they go to Lisa Marie. Forward, yes. Okay, so just a map to warm up a bit about what is European landscapes look like, or at least demographically. You can see that it's quite diverse. We have places where there is a decrease in population, and there is also places with a light or even strong increase in population. As such, that's interesting to look at and to try to explain, maybe even in kind of central periphery theory. But of course, there is much more. If we look at the rural depopulation, often it's seen as a threat for sustainable development, because these places experience an aging of the population. There is also often a social isolation. There's a degradation of the rural patrimony, like you can see here, and often there's a lack of services in rural areas. These are a bit the left behind places. Most of the pictures I show you are from central and northern France, a place where I take my students to show this kind of processes. And actually, this divide that we see in many continents between rural and urban also has to do with these processes. These people feel left behind, are not happy, and then, yeah, there's a kind of polarization even in society. Now, on the other side, the abandonment also offers possibilities. There is the possibility to increase the forest cover, like the previous presentation shows. There is a possibility for maybe nature restoration, for rewilding, for a better river management, to give room to the rivers and to the wildlife. So that means that this abandonment can be seen as a process with positive effects or opportunities on the one side, but also with a lot of challenges or negative effects on the other side. That means if you have a system with positive and negative outcomes, that there's maybe some optimization possible. At least we need to manage this. So that's, I think, a strong plea to look in more detail at these abandonment processes. Another motivation is the amount of money that goes to these places. If you look at the budget of the EU, that goes to the support of rural development, the social cohesion fund, European Regional Development Fund. A lot of this money is assigned for the development of these places that are losing population. So we talk about 1/4, or even broadly speaking 50% of the budget of the EU, and that's not even taking into account all the money that the national governments put into this. So it's quite a lot of money that is available. The question is, what is now the best use of all this funding? So then if we look at the science on this topic, we see that it's both tackles or is part of the social sciences. When you look at the people that have their livelihood and decide to migrate or not to migrate, and what is the livelihood of the people that are left behind. And on the other hand, it's also more a biophysical land cover change story in which you use all kinds of tools to look at what happens with the land cover itself, with the biophysical land cover. And that's a bit a problem that has been raised in many of these sessions. The Global Land Program is trying to unify these two science communities that are still drifting apart a bit. I see it in my own division. We have social, qualitative researchers, and we have this more physical oriented, and to bring them together is still a challenge. And if you look at the literature, it's quite fragmented on this land abandonment. We have case studies in several parts in the world. We have more social approaches, more remote sensing, more physical approaches of this abandonment. So the question that we were asking ourselves a bit is now a unifying framework to tackle this problem, to study it, and then maybe to come with policy recommendations. Is that possible? And we have the feeling that it should take into account both population and the environment at the same time. And to keep it simple, as a starting point, we thought of this bivariate framework that I'd like to propose to you. So we could classify municipalities or regions, or even whole countries, according to whether the land use on average is intensifying or rather extensifying. Intensifying could mean, for example, we go from forest to grassland, or from grassland to arable land, and in the arable land you could have the highly intensive agriculture or the less intensive, and the other way around. Okay? The other axis could then be population increase or decrease. Now this already implies that the story is not that simple, that if there is a population decrease, automatically there is an extensification of the land. In theory, you could think of these 4 quadrants as 4 different types of landscape evolution. So let's look maybe at the first one. No, let's look at them all together actually. The first one, excuse me, something should appear here. Okay, no. First I'll show the map. So if there's a population increase and land use intensification, that's red on the map. If it's a population increase but the land use extensification, that means, for example, more forest but at the same time more people, then it's blue. If it's a population decrease and extensification, that is left aside places where there's also a rewilding taking place, that's green on the map, and yellow is then population decrease but together with the land use intensification. And then Lisa Marie made this map. Here you can show that Europe is quite patchwork with all kinds of types possible. The green, for example, Germany, a lot of population decline, but at the same time it's getting a bit greener. While we see, for example, in France, it's a bit a mixture of the blue, population increase and forest increase, or population increase and forest decline. And if we go to the Balkan, for example, we see population decline, forest decline, and also a bit of the green, population decline, forest increase. So this mapping already gives us the first impression that a unified or uniform, let's say, European policy for all the rural areas in Europe, that makes no sense because it's quite diverse. Let's then maybe look at the first analysis of how many people are involved and what's the area that is involved. So we see that this complete abandonment and forest decline, that is a fraction, a significant fraction, but the smallest. Then if you look at places where the forest is in decline, but the population is in increase, actually, that is also very significant. Next slide shows then a bit in a kind of brainstorm session that we had the challenges of all of these different types. If you look at places with population increase and at the same time a land use intensification, then we're in areas where there is clear high pressure on the land, so it's not the abandonment actually, it's the opposite, with all kinds of conflicts over the land, like residential versus farming, residential versus nature, or farming versus nature. An example I can give here is the place where I come from, which is the northern part of Belgium called Flanders, where you see that this is what happened till now and this is what is expected to come. A lot of conflicts between the urban and the arable, because we have very good soils also, but the farmers are extremely unhappy when there is more build-up. At the same time, we also want to protect the nature with all kinds of rules and restrictions we put upon our farmers. They're not happy and they come from the rural to the urban to protest. Almost every month we have farmers' protests in Brussels. So these are some challenges for these red zones. If we move to the blue is increase in population. Oh, sorry. Increase in population. Can I point it? Here. Yeah. Increase in population, but at the same time, extensification of the land use. These are places in which people move, but at the same time, the farmers stop or extensify, and you get more green, but at the same time, more people that live there. And this is maybe a category that has been a bit understudied. This is a place where you get new wildlife-urban interfaces. More people, but also more nature at the same time. People are attracted by the green environments, and that are at the same time a bit accessible. So we talk typically about green areas in the wider surroundings of cities, and they would go and find a job there, but then return to their home. Leads to conflicts with animals. That's, for example, to conflicts that you have in Eastern Europe with the bears and the wolves and so on. At the same time, also forest fires and the extreme damage they can cause to people's property is in that category. To show the examples, for example, the forest fires we had in Catalonia or in Greece or in many other places the past years, that is typically new housing that is installed in areas that used to be farmland. The farmers are gone. There is new forest or the forests that were there are not maintained very well. You get these forest fires in the surrounding typically of bigger cities, and you get this kind of problems. This graph I took from my colleague Dominic Keim, who works on urban wildlife interfaces and conflicts, and as you can see over time it has been increasing. Okay, that's this category. Let's move to the green category. That is extensification, abandonment of the land, and at the same time people leave. These are the left alone places and of almost all economic activity and a lot of social problems. Aging, population decline, all kinds of difficult circumstances related to ghost villages. We can think of central of France, center of Spain, also in Eastern Europe. You see these places, and yeah, this is an example of a farmhouse, for example. Still people live there, typically very old people, but it's a very hard living. These people are unhappy because they're detached from all kinds of utilities and so on. At the same time, this is a model that we developed. What you see is that not all the rural villages in such places depopulate. Some of the villages grow still a bit, while others develop into ghost villages because there's also rural migration. Some people, they don't want to live in the city, and when a place is collapsing, they prefer to live in a village that is just a little bit bigger, and it's often a very sharp tipping point between the total collapse or the growth of a city into of a village into a slightly bigger village. So that's an interesting process to study in that kind of landscapes. Let's move on. Let's move to the yellow. The yellow is then intensifying the land use, but at the same time a population decrease. So that is a place where farmers actually rule the landscape, and they don't have to deal with all kinds of conflicts with people that live nearby, or the land is not eaten up by urban area. But the problem there is, of course, that it can lead to ecological desertification. It's an extreme example of land sparing. It's only farming, highly intensive farming, even more intensive. These farms can even expand, and then you get landscapes like this. This is an area which is called the Champagne area in France, one of the places with topsoils in Europe. People left these places. There is a lot of farming ongoing, but highly mechanized farming, so you don't have a lot of employment there. And this type of landscapes, problems are often very far offsite when you get this eutrophication of the rivers and so on. So this, all these problems you can link then to this map, which I showed before. And the ambition we have with our research group, but actually looking for partners to study this together, is to then look at, what is now the ideal policy, or what should be done with these areas. Secondly, we also want to study how does a specific region moves along this bivariate space. But it can be that an area, for example, is yellow now, but maybe it goes to green or to red in the future. Also, we believe that the analysis we present now is at a certain administrative level, which is, for the people from Europe, maybe they will know, it's nudge 3 level, but we could also develop these maps at the level of villages and then see how they evolve over time. But the conclusion, or the preliminary conclusion, is that one standard policy to deal with the problems and maybe the opportunities of land abandonment is absolutely not possible. We need to map at higher resolutions because there is still a lot of interregional variance in the zones that are presented here now. And it's also called for collaboration on this type of evolutions together with social scientists, landscape ecologists to come to a kind of sustainable development pathway for this type of area. So I'm very happy that we have this session, and I hope we can have a discussion on this also after this session even. But if you have questions now, I'm happy to answer them or say that I don't have the answer yet.
Thank you. Now time for a couple of the questions.
Oh, thank you. It's a nice presentation. I have 2 short questions. First of all, I'm wondering why did you use the world pop data and not Eurostat data?
Yes.
Because I come from Romania, and apparently your population data does not have some biases. I don't know. I have some questions about the increase in some NUTS 3 population. So that's
Yes.
one question, and the other one is related to your schema of these 4 classes, and how you tackle the situation. For example, what I saw in coastal areas when developers build secondary homes for people who do not move there. So there is an intensification in land use because of the development, but there is no increase in population. According to your schema, these are areas ruled by farmers. But as I saw in the PAN and Belgium, there is a problem of secondary homes along the coast, and it's not just the Belgian problem. So how you tackle these exceptions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe first on the Eurostat and the Worldpop. So we started with Eurostat, but we found out that the database is a bit a mess if you go to multi-temporal data because of changing polygons over time, which we can still understand. But the Eurostat data, we found that at the moment is not suitable for longitudinal analysis. Maybe this is a temporal problem. And the Worldpop data we found more suited because you can extract whatever polygon you like from your raster data set. But for the further studies, for sure, we hope that we can use the Eurostat data. If there's deviations or not, that's a good question. Normally the Eurostat data should be error-free, but they made a mess of their data set. I don't know whether people have similar experiences, but for this longitudinal data, we left ourselves out for the moment with Worldpop data. The secondary homes, that's a very interesting element, which is of course not in data that you would have at census and so on. I think for that we need to dive deeper into the data, fine-tune the resolution, and really go to municipality level and ask how many secondary homes are there here. Maybe even use remote sensing to detect them, and that's the next step to fine-tune this. But it's very relevant, especially for the forest fires in the coastal areas and so on, often in secondary homes. Absolutely, I agree.
Thank you. A little bit of more time for one more question.
Thank you. This was a great framework and gave me some ideas also. But I'm curious about northern Sweden and northern Finland and Norway, where population has declined and the forest also is declining. And is there agroforestry over there which was harvested, and that's why the forest declined?
So what we did for this study, again, it's maybe a quick and dirty analysis. We took all the forest types together. And of course, in these areas, there's a lot of plantation forest also. It may have to do with the moment in time that this snapshot was taken and whether there was just a clear cut or not. On top of that, there is hardly any people living here. So population decline or increase for these very sparsely low density population areas, it's a very thin or very sharp flipping point. So I would not pay too much attention to whether it's now in this category or in this category. Also there, I think we should go to a more detailed analysis at that municipality level to get a grip on what is really happening there.
Thank you. Maybe we'll get extra questions later after the discussion.
Okay.
So in a discussion, and I will also propose maybe to meet informally tomorrow with those who are interested about this topic, expand on the land abandonment.
So that concludes our session. So please give another round of applause to our speakers and also actually to yourself for joining our session. So really appreciate it. And I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference, and I'll see you around.
Just a remark, if you have some spare time, of course it's busy, maybe we can meet those who are interested about this topic and promote our working group on Thursday, tomorrow, maybe during the lunch we can get together, sit, chat. That will be probably the best way to exchange about. But you're also more than welcome to go on the website of Global Land Program and sign up for the group, and pretty sure we will really enjoy it. Thank you. Thank you.